a lot of people show up to film school, arms crossed, going like, well, teach me. And it's like, no, you've got to ask not what your film school can do for you, right? Ask what you can do for your filmmaking career alone. And so that's the other thing is put yourself out there, ask questions, don't be afraid of rejection, put yourself in the way of success.
This episode is sponsored by Pelleplat and Craftsman Films.
Welcome back to Off the Lot. I'm Anthony Epp. I'm going solo today, and we are tackling one of the most contentious debates in filmmaking. Should you go to film school, or can you make it without a formal film school education? Now, this is a question that gets more complicated every year. Film school costs have skyrocketed while the technology and democratized filmmaking to the point where award-winning features are being shot on smartphones. At the same time, the industry has become more competitive and specialized than ever, with networking and technical expertise often determining who gets opportunities. And as we will find out, there are passionate advocates on both sides. But here's the thing, most of these debates are happening in echo chambers. Film school graduates are defending their investment, and self-taught filmmakers justify their path. And it's nice sometimes to get someone who's lived both sides of the equation. And that's why I'm excited to introduce today's guest, who is the ideal person to have this discussion with, Bob Woolsey. Bob brings a unique perspective to the film school debate, having lived it from every angle imaginable as an independent screenwriter, director, and film producer. Bob's work has been seen around the world and garnered multiple awards. He wrote and produced the dark fantasy feature film Charlotte's Song, together with Ewan Rheon of Game of Thrones fame. What makes Bob's story particularly compelling is his 18-year journey at Vancouver Film School, where he climbed from the teaching assistant to head of department for the film production program from 2006 to 2024. Bob helped shape the VFS model of applied education and was an integral part in launching the career of multitudes of filmmakers. Now, as the public relations and international content manager at Pelleplat, which we will talk about, an internet platform for film and TV lovers that integrates a film and television database, film articles and reviews, community-driven film forums and discussion threads, and an original story incubator, Bob continues mentoring the next generation of filmmakers while building global film communities. Welcome to Off the Lot, Bob.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
The reason we wanted to chat, and obviously we're going to talk about Pelleplat later because I'm really fascinated by this platform, and I've read a lot of the articles on it. I want to get into sort of like the whys and hows and what prompted something like this platform to exist. But let's get into the film school debate. And I'd like to kind of tackle the elephant in the room, if you will, because there's two issues that I see always coming up with regards to film school that I think we can probably talk about right away. And one, of course, is the financial investment debate.
The financial part of it is such a huge thing, yes.
Obviously, film schools, they vary in range and in terms of tuition costs and so on. So let's just, let's talk about the financial investment as a starting point. Let's just arguably say that you have $30,000 and you want to get into the film industry. So what makes the $30,000 investment into a film school education versus, say, taking that $30,000 and using it for another purpose and kind of School of Hard Knocksing it? What would you say are sort of the pros and cons to both ideas? And I have my thoughts as well.
Yeah, and I'm not going to take a cop out, but I think so much of it comes down to who you are, where you are in your life, what you have available to you, all of those things. But I will say right off the top, either path is completely valid. It would be kind of morally bankrupt of me to say that film school is not worth it, because I spent, as you mentioned, 18 years working at a film school and actually did a lot of recruitment and signed a lot of people up. So I'm a firm believer that film school, can be worth the investment. And I say can be worth the investment because so much of it comes down to who you are as a person. And like I say, where you are in your life, because, myself, as an example, I grew up in Northern British Columbia. I didn't even realize that making movies was a job until probably, in university. And I was at the University of Northern British Columbia studying to be a teacher, because that was kind of the only job that I felt within the realm of my experience that I kind of had permission to do. And there was one film course up there, and I took it and I thought there's an infrastructure behind this. There's an education system behind this. There's people that get paid to do this, which sounds really dumb in a lot of ways, but that was really my mentality growing up in rural Northern British Columbia. So for me, it made a lot of sense. Film school gave me the reason, the magnet to kind of go, I was at the point in my life where I was supposed to go to post-secondary education. I had left the post-secondary that I was in. And so, yeah, film school was really logical for me as a way to, my mentor actually at the film school, Michael Baser, always used to say, you have to put yourself in the way of success, right? And film school was the only way that I could kind of put myself in the way of a film career of any kind. I went to the Vancouver Film School, but I didn't have enough money, to the question about finances, I didn't have enough money to afford the full film program. So I took the screenwriting program instead, which I'm so happy that I did. And I think that that was much more sort of my tribe, and I found wonderful people there. So I kind of have this story where I did film school in the screenwriting sense, but at the same time, I graduated having no idea how to really make a movie. We did a couple of exercises at the school at that time. And there's since a course that I helped create and that Ken actually taught for a while for producing for writers, which is really valuable now. But at the time, there was nothing really about the nuts and bolts. There's that old adage of, the screenwriter writes, the army comes over the hill. And then next thing it takes a couple thousand people to actually make that scene happen, right? So my real film school, like learning how to actually make films, was after I graduated from the screenwriting program and kind of decided that the traditional screenwriting route of kind of sitting and banging out scripts and then going and getting rejected over and over again wasn't for me. And so I worked on a feature film with some friends. I had gathered sort of some collaborators by that point, and we worked on a feature film. And that to me was my film school. But everybody that I worked with on that, I had met through the film school, or they had gone to film school for the more technical aspects in a traditional kind of film program. That to me is the big thing: is what do you have available, and how industrious and how entrepreneurial are you? If you have $30,000, it's one of those things where when you haven't been to film school, $30,000 seems like a really good investment for film school. The moment you graduate, you're going, why didn't I spend my $30,000 on a film? That's a budget. That's a dream budget for a lot of starting out filmmakers. So I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, and there's an analogy I always say. It's like the same thing with like eating a meal, where it's like, you order all your food and you eat it, and then you get the bill at the end and you go, well, oh, why did I order all this food? I didn't expect to. I wasn't even really that hungry, and it's only because you sort of see the ticker at the end, and you go like, oh wow, I just spent a lot of money on something, and I don't, I'm not full. I'm not hungry anymore because I've already eaten. I've already gotten what I got out of it. And I maybe had a very similar path, although I came to it a little bit later. I went to film school when I was 30. Well, I was 34 when I signed up. And so I had this sort of life experience. And it wasn't that I had the money necessarily to go, because that money, again, I had expenses and I had other things I had to be spending money on. But the financial investment for me with regards to education has always been, that's an investment in yourself. So one way or another, whether you're taking that money and using it as, like, let's say you're taking that $30,000 and using it to fund a very low budget independent film movie. You say, I'm going to take my $30,000 and I'm going to make a movie for $30,000. Well, you have to view that as an educational expense, an investment in yourself, which means that you have to you can't think of that $30,000 as, I'm going to make the best movie ever made in my life. I'm going to make a movie that's going to teach me all of these things that I need to learn in order to become a good filmmaker or a writer or a director or something like that. So that's how I've always viewed the financial part of it, because it's, I think, the debate doesn't even matter what field you're going into or what you want to do. Should you go to get an arts degree at a university and spend, $50,000, $40,000 on a 4-year degree, maybe more depending on where you're going, to get an arts degree, to get an English degree, to get a history degree? In theory, what does a history degree get you? Like financially, it's not, other than an opportunity to become a history teacher, which means you go for more school, right?
Which is what I was doing. Yeah. It was history, ironically.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that inherently. I mean, if we're taking it purely from the utilitarian value of the $30,000 expense, there's definitely ways to justify not spending that money and spending it on something more pragmatic. And this is where I want to get into the weeds a little bit more on this, is that, that what does that money give you in life, in all these other things? And I'll just use my example, and then maybe we'll pivot back to you. Like, I think to myself, okay, so I can't remember now what film school cost when we went there, but I got a student loan on it as well. So overall, I'm just going to say it was $30,000. Well, I have worked in the industry for the last 15 years. Arguably, in at least one of those years, I've made well over $30,000 in a job situation in the film industry. Did film school get me that job, or make it possible for me to be in a position to get that job, which then paid for itself? And I mean, over the course of my lifetime in the film industry or making films, have I made that money back, and has that investment proven to be worthwhile? I would argue in my situation that yes. I mean, it makes sense if I take a pure dollar for dollar expense. It's like, if I spent $30,000 on film school, have I made 10 times that in the film industry over 15 years? I'd say for sure. That's definitely as a in terms of jobs. So I don't know how you feel about that in terms of equating it to if I'm justifying it.
No, that's actually a very logical way to put it, and my brain works a little less logically sometimes, because I think one of the things that film school is selling is a lot less nuts and bolts. It's selling dreams, right? And that's the hard part of, like, do you feel like you're living your dream? And so I think that the reality is always somewhere in between those two questions, right? Because everybody has this idea they're going to go to film school. Not everybody, but most people have this idea they're going to go to film school and they're going to be, Steven Spielberg or George Lucas or somebody like that, kind of were the first wave of those film school directors. So I think the bigger question is sort of, what do you want to get out of it? And the thing about film is that it's a collaborative industry. It's a relationship industry. And so if you have any relationships whatsoever, or you have the ability to go to a place where you can find those relationships, do that first, because it's probably going to be significantly less expensive. However, if you find yourself in a place where I was, and I'm assuming kind of from the episode you guys did about your background and what you've just said, Anthony, that you were kind of in a similar situation of, like, you didn't have those relationships to be able to call on, of, like, to get onto a film set, to get the chance to, like, play around with a camera, to get the chance to work with actors, to do all those things. And so it really, to me, that's what it comes down to. Because the other thing about film school, we both went to a very sort of truncated 1-year applied education model, which is what VFS is. There's different kinds of film school out there in terms of a 4-year degree program. You can do master's degree programs. There's all different kinds of film schools out there. And so for me, that kind of is the matrix that you need to look at, because there's no way that you can bank on living your dream by paying to go to film school. That's the one thing right off the bat. If you feel like it's going to make you a filmmaker, it's not going to make you a filmmaker. Life chooses you to be a filmmaker. You don't choose to be a filmmaker. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is, do you need a degree? Is that important to you? That's going to automatically be a fork in the road of all the different kinds of film schools. In my opinion, I think that spending 4 years studying film to get into the film industry is a complete waste of time. I think that's one of the things that that VFS and these other short form film schools do really well, is they accelerate that. They give you a bit of a shortcut to industry by not only giving you relationships with your, the instructors and the mentors and all of the people that they bring in, but with your classmates. And that, to me, is, I think, the thing that I saw most at the film school over and over and over again. There was wonderful relationships, like I say, between instructors and students, and there was continuing mentorship, and there was a leg up given that way. And that part, the school can kind of control. The thing that the school couldn't control as much was just that lottery of who gets put into a cohort together. And that, to me, is one of the big things that's really special, is those folks that you're going to meet and then you're going to come up through the industry together. And I think that's the kind of thing. Again, I'm going to be a little less logical about my financial evaluation here, but that's the kind of thing you can't really put a price on. I still, to this day, write with a guy that I met in film school at VFS back in 2005. On the first day, he laughed at one of my jokes, and I thought that, because not everybody, it was a bit of a subtle joke. And from that moment forward, we've been collaborators. And that is what you need. You have to find collaborators. Particularly, you and I have both kind of pursued the indie film route. And I think that's the thing where when you're making an indie film, even when you're making a larger film, when you have money, the problems are just a little bit different, but it's still all problems. But especially when you're making an indie film and there's nobody screaming down your throat with, where's our money and this and that, you're kind of having to get the thing going on your own. You're going to need people that are going to be in the trenches with you, that are going to push you forward, that are going to, pick you up when you fall down, that you can pick up when they fall down. You really need those very close collaborators. And so that to me is kind of the larger thing, is like, and this is kind of from the lens of if you want to, be a key on a film set, if you want to be somebody that's going to be making the big decisions, writing the screenplay, producing, directing, those kinds of things. There's so much that you just can't really learn in a classroom. You have to do it. And that's true of all roles on a set. But the more technical roles, like in the, on the camera team, in post-production, those roles that are a lot more tied to the technical element, that I think if you're really passionate about, that kind of it, I think film school is a fantastic option, because you get to go and you'd want to look into the film school again that you're going to, but you get to go and touch that gear, you get to play with those systems, you get to learn those workflows. So I think again, I'm not trying to take a cop-out way of doing this here, but it really depends on who you know. And film school is going to introduce you to so many people and hopefully give you those relationships, like I say, that are going to kind of power you through your career.
You can pick up a lot of tips and tools on, for example, YouTube, or like taking an online class or something like that. But ultimately, in the end, you still have to go and play with the equipment. So like I can watch a YouTube video on how to get great cinematography in a film. But if I don't have a camera, if I want to learn about how to get good location sound, like what's important about location sound, if I don't go out and practice using my microphone, and if all I'm doing is going out and recording sounds on the street just to sort of get practice in recording sounds, well, I can't apply that to anything in the moment because I don't have a film project to work on. So I might be doing all this stuff and learning the technical side of things, but I'm not applying it to a project-based finishing item. And where I found film school was very advantageous in this regard. And again, you would just have to replicate this on your and find, like you said, a who sort of thing, is like, can you get together 10 to 15 people who all are motivated enough to want to spend the time to learn these tools to put together a project that allows you to actually apply what you're learning on YouTube or whatever it is. And I think that with the film school approach, what you've done is you go, okay, well, there's a project. Here's the project. The project is make a short film, or make a documentary, or do a class exercise. And through that, you're going to practice your location sound, your camera work, your lighting, your blocking, all of the directing skills that you need. Because even though as a director you don't need to be an expert in how a light works, you do need to know what a light does, and you need to know what you can ask for. And also you need to know how to communicate your vision to people and get them to do the work for you. I used to say that filmmaking is like painting, except your paintbrushes are people. And what you need to do is learn what people can do, what tools do what, which people do what, and how to get the most out of those people.
Totally. I'm thinking of like an A24 horror movie now where there's a guy that actually paints with people. But anyway, we'll pitch that later. But no, I think you're absolutely right. It's just all there packaged for you. Again, like I always used to say to all of the students that I met around the world that were looking to get into film school, because the question everybody has, whether they want to go to film school or they want to make a film, is how do I get there? Like how do I see myself doing this thing on a film set? How do I get there? And so, to your point, if you're not going to go to film school, let's put it this way, because like I say, it's all packaged, it's ready to go. It's these assignments, you're being walked through things. There's experts there to help you and tap you on the shoulder and say, do it this way, don't do it that way. If you don't have that, there's really only two ways you can go about it, right? And one is to go and volunteer on any film set you can and start from the very, very bottom. And actually on Charlotte's Song, we had a guy that did that, this young guy, James, who was our Tad on that movie, because we were so indie. And to call him a Tad is like to say that, our AD department was organized. And no disrespect to our ADs, they were brought in very last minute, but he came in with zero experience. We were like, well, why don't you just do this and kind of babysit, bringing the actors back and forth and this and that. He now is super established as a crew member in town. I bumped into him at Whistler just a few months ago, and yeah, he's thriving. But you start with nothing, and you have to be willing to do anything, and you have to be ready to keep your mouth shut about most, if not all, of the creative ideas that you have. Right? Nobody wants to hear it from the guy that just walked onto the set. So that's one way. And then the other way to do it, if you don't go to film school, is you have to have intellectual property. You have to be a good writer. You have to have really good ideas. And if you have a really good idea and you're a decent writer, that will also allow you a little bit of squeak in. But then too, you still have to get your work in front of people, and you have to be pitching to people and all of that kind of thing. But those to me are the two kind of ways that you do it if you don't go to film school. But when you do go, it's one of those things that you just got to do your research. And what I would say, and definitely a lot of the problems that I saw over my time there with people who didn't have the best experience, was they didn't find those collaborators. They were isolated, or they felt like maybe they were operating at a little higher level than maybe some of their classmates. And that's the thing that I would say to most people is when you first get to whatever film school you're going to, if you've made that investment, hold them to account. If you see, you look around and you don't see collaborators within the first month or so of your program, oftentimes you can still get a giant refund at that point, and you can leave and go do something else if you're not finding those people. But I guarantee you, if you go and take the time and you have a good attitude about it, there's so many people that go through film school and it either somebody else has paid for them, or they just don't value money, because you see those folks, and they're a minority, they're a huge minority, but you see those folks that show up and just don't try. But if you're going into film school with a good attitude, and you're in there in good faith, and you want to really put your best foot forward, because that's what the film industry is. You need to be showing up early, staying late, doing like 10%, if not 20% more than you've been asked. At the end of the day, nobody cares if you went to film school or not. All they care about is, can you deliver on whatever they've given you to do? And film school can help you have those skills to do that. If you're able to do it and find those relationships without it, then that's fine too. But yeah, it's one of those questions that really is only answerable by the individual person who's asking it at any given moment in time,
Yeah, and I would say that you brought up a really good point about this idea of also the safe learning environment, I think, and learning with people who are at an equal or people who can push you, but are also kind of at that same professional level at that moment. Even when I taught some classes at VFS, I would sit there and I never thought it was a bad thing to get something wrong, because I was like, here's the place to get it wrong. Like, honestly, if someone came to me, like I was teaching some AD courses, and I was like, if someone came to me with this breakdown and they were working for me, I might be under pressure to replace them with someone who knew who could deliver faster, because there's very little room on an actual professional movie set for you to come in and learn on the job, but be so green that you're making crucial errors on day one. And you almost need to have a little bit of that leg up where you could still make those errors, but you know how to recover from them on a professional set. Whereas in film school, I was like, okay, you know what? You didn't set up the camera properly. Okay, let's spend 10 more minutes and let's get that done right. How does that sound? How does the sound come in? And I'm using sound as an example just because it's one of the skills that people go to film school and don't think they need to worry about, or don't think of themselves as getting into the sound department. But the sound is obviously, as we all know, a very important part of the film. But learning how to hear sound properly, or what to listen for, and having an instructor there basically is telling you, are you hearing that crackling? Well, that means you have to turn your gain down. Well, I can't tell you how many times I've worked with people out there who I listen to the footage later. There's it's peaked, or it's gone above, and that's in a professional environment. That's a person who's a professional sound mixer who's making this mistake, and I didn't know, and we don't know it on set. So we have an interview that we listen to later, and we're like, oh my gosh, they're peaking on everything. So it's that little thing of make your mistakes here. These mistakes are sunk expenses already, because the film school tuition's paid for. You're not going to be kicked out or fired for making an error, especially if your intention is good. If you are trying hard but you're making mistakes, that's one thing. And I agree with you. I think it also does come down to the cohorts you're with. That is the lottery ticket of the class that you enter into. And, if you come in with all ganging enthusiasm and everything like that, and you have a class of people who just aren't there, then it can be a little bit disheartening, and you can feel like maybe you weren't getting it out. In my opinion, if I were in film school doing that, and I found this, although I did have a fairly good class, is looking at the classes above and beneath me and seeing what they're up to. A lot of the times there were shoots going on weekends and things like that even though it was adding on to the workload I already had, I was like, okay, well, I can go meet and work on a film set of someone in the class above me or something, and just see what they're up to and do it with a little bit less pressure. Like I can just do it as a PA. I don't have to do it as a person who's getting graded on my work necessarily.
It would be more romantic if they stayed together.
The door would not stay afloat.
It's a movie, not a documentary.
Are you insane, bro? It was a real life tragedy.
Why are you so obsessed with tragedy?
Here's an idea. Why don't the two of you take your hot takes to Pelleplat? They're holding a contest for people like you. Plus, there's cash prizes.
Game on.
So, who won?
Straight away.
We both won. Yeah, we found our people.
Perfect. By the way, what about the end of Inception?
Don't even.
No,
I know you're gonna start.
No,
I've
you need to look at
Pelleplat Writing Challenges, where passionate minds meet. Join today at pelleplat.com. Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that to the technical part of it, you're absolutely right. Like, that is the place to make those mistakes and to learn how to, really hone those technical skills so that when you are on a set, there's that guarantee of quality, because you only have a couple of times to shoot anything and move on. You're absolutely right. I think the other side of the coin, though, is the more, like I say, the more creative elements and the real key roles, which is always the kind of, battle here in Vancouver, because as a service town, a lot of those key roles kind of, if you want those jobs, you actually have to go to LA to get hired to do them, which is a whole nother episode. But it's one of those things where I think if you want to be a director, especially if you want to be even a producer, and to a certain extent a writer as well, that's one of those things where there's a lot of compromises that you have to make at film school. Compromises that are kind of antithetical to the role of being a director, in terms of all of those things that we were just talking about being benefits, in terms of you've got these parameters and these assignments that you have to do and you're learning certain things. As a director, the risk of that is that you're compromising on who you are as a filmmaker, that thing that makes you unique, to do it the proper way, and it can become dogmatic at times, I think, is the other real risk. And so, that's a battle that I had a lot of times at the film school, particularly when I got into more leadership roles, of trying to empower the young directors, while at the same time, making it clear to them that we're running a film school, and you're somebody's kid and we've been entrusted with you. The safety's got to be number one. I can't have you running around without a permit doing stuff. I'm not going to do anything that's going to get you guys, if the spectrum goes all the way to you guys get thrown in jail, we can't do that. Sorry. That to me is one of those things where, and I'm not advocating for people to just skip film school and go break a bunch of laws, but at the same time, one of the things, and I felt this when I graduated, I was really extremely valuable for the screenwriting education that I had received. However, at the end of the year, you almost have to consciously forget everything you were taught to recapture that spark of creativity that's kind of innately you. And in today's world, as you mentioned in the intro, it's so democratized of who can make a film now. Really, the only secret sauce you have is that little weird part about you that makes you you. You have to bring that to a movie, and you have to put it into a movie. Otherwise, you're just going to be drowned out in the sea of all of those films out there. So that's the other part of it that I think is really interesting, is knowing that if you want to be a director or any of these other kind of key roles, going to film school is a step along the way, but you cannot, and it's kind of that example you were talking about, if you took that money and made a film instead, you can't wait for that, or you can't sort of count on that film to be your calling card film right off the bat. And that's the thing that I think is a benefit to knowing nothing and doing something with absolutely zero resources, is you can still learn those lessons, particularly now when you can do most of it on your phone, and you can level up project by project, and there isn't anything on the line. There's nobody screaming for their money back. There's, if it gets into a film festival, great. If not, you wasted a weekend doing a short film, and you had fun. So there's that part of it too. When you've spent 30 grand to go to film school, you really grip the stick pretty tightly thinking, I need this movie to be successful. And then you're still trying to serve two masters in your own creativity and all of the guidelines that a film school needs to have. And so, that's something that I think people want to go into film school with their eyes wide open on. And that's that dream part of it that they're selling, is no amount of money is going to make your dream come true. And most times it's the movies that don't work out properly, that don't quite make it to that level. Those are the ones you learn the most on, right? So I think that's the other part of it. And particularly in today's technological landscape, it's really a good thing. You can't count on any one thing to be the one. You kind of just got to put your best effort in, finish it. That's the other part of it. You've got to finish whatever you're working on, especially when it doesn't live up to your expectations. Still finish it, still send it out to whatever festivals you can, and move on, and then do another one and another one. And that's really the key. Is film school to me is a shortcut. It's a tremendous investment if you go to the right one. You can really strike the lottery if you meet those collaborators. But when you graduate, you're still nobody in the film industry. And you kind of then have to pick everything up and start over again from there, right? So it's a hard industry to get into. And that was always the part, working at a film school and doing recruitment and meeting a lot of really wonderful filmmakers, and knowing that so much of it is going to come down to the luck of the draw. And do they get the break when they need the break? Do they meet the person that's going to get them the funding? Can they get their material in front of the right person? All of those things are still hard either way. And so, yeah, there's just no guarantees, I guess. I could have probably summed up that entire last 5 minutes of me talking with, there's no guarantees.
Well, it's like going to acting school, for example. Like you go to VFS or any acting school that's a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year program or whatever it is. It's like there's no guarantee of a career at the end of an acting school, right? Like all that you can do is learn and practice, learn the techniques that you need, how to rehearse for roles, how to make yourself prepared. But ultimately, in the end, an audition is as much a lottery ticket as anything else. Like I've sat in auditions where I've seen the same person auditioning for multiple different roles, and they're almost always they always come in as the second or the third choice, not because they're even worse than the first choice. It's just that it's this one's the person we think is perfect for the role. This one is like perfect almost. And if that person turned down the role, this person would have a job. But they didn't. So this person now has maybe done all the work, the same work, and they're unemployed and they can't get work in the industry. And of course, as we all know, in acting especially, is like credits beget credits. Like you get a role, and then that just justifies someone else hiring you for another role, and so on. So once you get off to the races, you are more likely to get more roles. But getting that first role is still, it's a luck of the draw sort of thing. But does that negate the reason to go to the school or to do the training in the first place? And I would think, like, for most actors, like, you got to get some kind of place to practice your and learn and develop, because I don't know a single person who just shows up to an audition without knowing anything and gets a role.
It's so true. And you bring up that point about track record, right? Like the moment you do kind of get the chance to do the thing and prove you can do it, that's worth its weight in gold, because then people will hire you over and over again. And I think that's a really key part of it as well. Telefilm, if you're looking to be funded as a Canadian filmmaker, that's the same. Like once you get in once and they have trust in you, then you get it again and again and again. And yeah, it's just a matter of kind of finding those breaks. I mean, I think a lot of what we've talked about is when you decide you want to become a filmmaker, you've got to fill your toolbox full of tools, right? And, film school kind of brings all those tools into one place. And so it's a lot easier to find what you're looking for. You can just go straight to that source. They've got all these tools. They're the most used tools. They're the tried, tested, and true tools. Whereas if you're starting from scratch, the tools are spread out all over the place, and you've got to go and hunt them down kind of one by one. And I think that's kind of the way I look at it is and that's where the beauty of being a filmmaker, everything you do is a little something in your toolbox. The job you work on the part-time kind of night shift while you're trying to, make your way through film school, or trying to, save up money to make a movie or whatever it may be. All of those experiences are worthwhile. It really just comes down to do you have the drive? Do you really want to do this? Because, nobody in their right mind chooses to be a filmmaker for, the job security or the guaranteed, I'm going to buy a house on this salary or whatever. You do it for the job satisfaction because you have to, and there's no other way to scratch that itch. And I think, again, that's one of those things where there's no way to teach that. That's in somebody or it's not. And I've seen really, really talented people come through the film school and do really well and have that career. And I've seen other folks where, not to cast any shade on, I loved all my students equally, obviously, but some folks come through and you're like, I don't see the talent necessarily, but they work hard enough and they learn and they adjust and they become successful too. So more than anything, it comes down to your work ethic. And I think that's the other thing film school gives you a little bit of a shortcut to is deadlines. With an applied education school that's really truncated like VFS, it's very intense, which is very much like the film industry. But that's the other thing is you need discipline. If you want to be a filmmaker on any regard, you have to make films. And if you want to be a director, especially, you have to direct. The only way to become a director is to direct. If you want to be a writer, you have to eventually, at some point, sit your butt in a chair and type out the words and, have it be terrible and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. That to me is the larger lesson that I think hopefully people learn from film school. But even if you don't go, you have to learn that lesson or, you don't make it, right? No matter how talented you are, if you can't have the discipline to attack the problem every day and try to find whatever route, whatever crack you can fit through to get there, then it's not going to work out for you.
Whether you are in film school or not in film school, the hustle and the work ethic are a universal principle. No matter what, you will find your pathway through experience and so on. But like, I never thought I would go to film school and become an assistant director. Like that was not something that I envisioned when I first walked in there, but I actually quite enjoy it. And I enjoy the production management and the producing side of things as a result of having gone and tried a few things and then sort of seen where my innate skills might lie, and then going, you know what, I really love this sort of problem solving aspect of filmmaking in a creative way, solve this kind of a challenge. And had I maybe, I might have found that path by working with people and sort of going, oh, you mean there's a role called an assistant director? What does that do? And then sort of figuring it out as I went, which is basically what you do anyway. You've kind of figured these roles out as you go, but you sort of find where your pathway lies and where your niche lies and where you can apply your creativity. Like you were saying, sometimes you look at someone and you're like, this person's not going to be necessarily that visionary director that is going to be an award-winning director because their voice and their writing and their ability to tell stories is so above the fold. But there's certainly a place for everybody in the film industry. Like there is certainly a place for any person to come in and go, look, I might not necessarily be, maybe I won't rise to the top and become an award-winning film director or an award-winning film writer. But boy, I could sure help put these projects together. If I'm that kind of a person, maybe that's my path. And maybe that's not even a compromise. Maybe that's actually like, no, actually, I actually really enjoy that part of things. I enjoy the pragmatic, practical, linear path of creating budgets or schedules or things like that. And then trying to find ways to Tetris a film project in the resources we have and using my knowledge and creative problem solving and maybe what I do know about directing and the art of making films to help solve those problems on a day-to-day basis. And that's where my path has led me more so than being a director. Like nobody's hiring me to be a director at this moment. They're hiring me to make a project happen, which is still thrilling.
Arguably more important, it doesn't happen without those people, right? The director doesn't even get to work if the project doesn't initially come together. Yeah, no, I agree. When I went to university, pre-film school, one of the things that blew my mind in the first year was just how many different subjects there were to study. You could be an anthropologist and study, chimpanzees, and like that's a job too, all of these kinds of things. And I think it's a similar thing when you go to film school is, like you're saying, learning all of those little connective roles, A, you might not have realized existed, but B, you might be really good at. And that's the other thing about there's something so joyful about finding a skill that you didn't know you had, especially in the context of a film set, where if you're good at something, people seek you out. They come and knock on your door to like, hey, I need you to do that thing you did because it was amazing. And it's really cool when that collaborative thing really clicks. Just a little bit of a turn of subject here, but I was just part of the Run and Gun filmmaking competition, which you guys had Joel and Sasha on the program, and they were talking about that. And that's one other thing I would really like to highlight about this is that, especially in places like Vancouver, where, like I say, we're a service industry. There's a lot of inherent kind of frustrations with that as a creative filmmaker. But what that comes with is a ton of resources. And, despite the fact that, like we were talking about, you can't just sort of walk onto a film set if you don't know how to deliver and this and that. Most people that work in film, they're pretty helpful. They want to help. They want to kind of pay it forward, and they want to see the next generation. And things like Crazy Eights, things like Run and Gun, all of these competitions that you can enter into that will help to give you some tools. There's educational components as well. But once you get to the point where you're greenlit, that gives you a get out of jail free card where you can say, I've never made a film, I don't know what I'm doing, right? But you can say, I'm making a Run and Gun on this weekend, will you come help me? And people go, oh, I know what Run and Gun is, right? Oh, you're making a Crazy Eights? I know what that is. You can go to the gear houses and say, listen, I'm doing a Crazy Eights. If I pay you in beer, can I take some stuff that's not being rented that weekend? All of those little things are really important too. And there's structures that are a lot more short form than committing to a full year-long program or a 4-year program. And that's also something on this film school side that's very valuable as well, but students forget about, is the moment that you go and say, hey, I'm a student, people will do things for you that they wouldn't normally do because they want to help you, because you're a student. Oh, I'm just, I need to learn. I need to be better. So that's the other thing of, like, you were talking about going and making movies with the other cohorts, or maybe outside of curriculum shooting some stuff. All of that stuff while you're a student, and you can play that student card and get into the cafe after they close, or, get into that bar before they open and use those locations for free because you're students. That's a really beneficial thing as well. So using all of those little elements while you're starting out, and not being afraid to ask for stuff, whether you're in film school or you're in one of these competitions or you're just doing a movie on a weekend. Ask. Every no that you get, it'll get you closer to a yes. And the people that say yes, they genuinely want to help. And you never know when one of them will become a lasting relationship. A lot of people show up to film school, arms crossed, going like, well, teach me. And it's like, no, you've got to ask not what your film school can do for you, right? Ask what you can do for your filmmaking career alone. And so that's the other thing, is put yourself out there, ask questions, don't be afraid of rejection. That kind of thing I said earlier, that bit of wisdom that I got of put yourself in the way of success. Nothing is more true than that. And, filmmaking is one of those careers that is a dream career. And so people will go out of their way to do things for filmmakers. I mean, maybe not as much in Vancouver as some places have been burned, but you go back to your hometown and say, hey, I'm making a movie, and people will bend over backwards to help you do that. So whether you're choosing the film school route or not, just ask. That's the biggest thing. And if you're in film school, ask for more because you've paid for it. It's one of those things, That's the other thing that I was going to mention, is like film school is a lot like making movies. It's a business, right? And so when in film, you're always trying to serve these two masters of the creative elements of the film and what's best for the film, and then these logistical concerns of what can we afford and how are we going to be able to make our investment back. And it's the exact same thing when you go to film school, whether you go to a private school like VFS or whether you go to a public school like UBC or SFU. It's an economy. People are making money, right? And so they've got that same dilemma where they've got their moral obligation to teach you the best curriculum that they can. But at the same time, you have to realize they're a business, right? They need to make money as well. And the sooner that you kind of realize that system, whether it's the film school system or ultimately making films, the better you're able to navigate and make creative decisions and ask for realistic things, and to try to make sure that you're getting, the most out of your investment, whether, again, it's film school or you're putting it into a film. You got to understand the full mechanics of how that world works. I think sometimes people show up to film school and the naivete is a little bit higher because they do think, hey, this is going to make me a filmmaker. And if there's one thing to take away is research your film schools diligently, go to the one that fits you best, And when you're there, ask for things and pick people's brains, do things outside of curriculum that, don't get you in trouble, but really milk it. Filmmaking is what you make of it, right? And you get out of it what you put into it. And it's never more true of this business than any other. You have to be willing to do the extra bit. And those are the people that stand out, whether you're super talented or not. Those are the people that stand out. So
to encapsulate this into a nutshell, it's like the film school is another. It's a way to engross yourself into this environment. But whether you're in film school or not, once you've made that decision, you have to do sort of the little things that are going to get you there. Show up, do the job that you're asked to do it better than what's expected, and do it with a smile on your face. Be a person who's useful. Because ultimately, in the end, in the film business, it's about, are you useful? Do people seek you out rather than you having to seek other people out? That comes from being valuable as early as possible. So in film school, you're valuable because you're a student and you're going to help that other director make their project. So you're going to work as the sound mixer on that project. So if you do a really good job as the sound mixer on a student project, and you're really you make everybody around you feel good that you're on their set, and they're asking, no matter what project they're on, everybody's asking, oh, as long as we have Bob on our set, we're going to have a good experience. It's going to be good, whatever role he takes. It's going to be fine. That's the person you want to be, because even if skills set aside, if you feel like you've got someone who's just a go-getter, wants to do everything or wants to help out in any way they can, that's a valuable skill, and you can develop that in film school if you can put your ego and some of that humble pie out of the equation and go, look, I don't need to direct every film. I just need to have people want me on their set, and if they want me on their set, then any one of those 30, 40 people that are in my class, if they ever get any kind of money or success or project that they're going to work, a talent to watch, a telefilm project or whatever it is, maybe I'll be their their first phone call. And that's all I need to go to that next step. But you can't sit there walking in there and think to yourself, okay, I'm Quentin Tarantino or I'm Martin Scorsese on day one, and go and then be disappointed when you're not, either the school, in your opinion, is not giving you what you need to be Martin Scorsese, or you're not, or somehow you're falling short of that expectation even for yourself. That's a very disappointing place to get to.
It's so true. And that kind of goes back to the thing we were saying about directors, because at the end of the day, too, directors, they quietly do have to think they're the next Tarantino to order. Like, being a director is an act of ego. And yet, nothing will kill a film set more than an ego that's out of control, right? And so, yeah, if you're a director walking into film school on day one thinking you're Quentin Tarantino, you got to know that the film school has an obligation to treat all of those people in your class equally. And so you got to know that your job at film school is to pick up all of those tool pieces and put them in your toolkit that you're going to need when you get out of the film school and you can really fully come into your next Tarantino persona. Especially in film school, one of the great things about it, and again, another dichotomy, is you're going to rotate through every role on the set. And you need to know when to speak up with a creative suggestion, and you need to know when to keep your mouth shut and let the keys figure it out. And that, to me, is, again, one of the bigger things is ego is the enemy of filmmaking in so many different ways. And yet making a film is an act of ego. And so if you can find a way to strike that balance and be a good person along the way, and still believe in yourself, but don't become a dick, like this is the needle that you have to thread. And yeah, film school can help, but in no way is it a silver bullet.
And I mean, it's a sports analogy, really. Like a team, like if you play a hockey team or something like that, like there's 20 players on an NHL hockey roster, however many in a beer league roster, but there's like a number of people on a roster, and everybody has a role to play, and you have to believe that you belong in the role that you're being asked to play, and you have to believe that you can perform that role. And sometimes you also have to have the confidence to know that you can take the shot when you're called upon to do so, and that you don't have to, just because you're not the highest goal scorer in the league, you don't have to pass it off. You have to kind of have a little bit of that confidence in yourself and that ego to be able to say, no, I know this I can do this, and approach it that way. But in the end, still learn. The very nature of filmmaking is communicating your vision to other people and letting them go about it. Quentin Tarantino has said he has a vision, but he hires and brings in the right people to help realize that vision. And you have to know how to identify what those people are, and you have to know how to communicate that and then have them go and execute, because they're the experts in this department or that department and so on. And if you've got people who are willing to go to bat for you, you'll be a better director. You'll look better as a director when you have good people who go out of their way to help you make your film.
I agree with you 100%. And I've seen so many young filmmakers come in and you say you have to have a vision, and they misinterpret that. And they think that them having a vision means that they tell everybody in a micromanagement way exactly how to do their job because that's their vision. It's like, no. Your vision is up here. The work, the nuts and bolts work that's going to happen down on ground floor, you've got to empower the people to do it because they know the larger picture. And that's something that, young filmmakers need to think about and reflect on, is that exact term, because so many of them have no idea what that means. And being able to communicate your vision to someone so that then they can harness their skill set and bring back work to you that meets your vision, but far exceeds anything that your talent would have been able to do. That's the key to filmmaking for sure. Sports is also a great one because, there's a lot of problems with a lot of culture surrounding hockey in particular and other sports. But I tell you, there's no greater analogy to working on a film set than being on a team playing a sport, trying to achieve a goal together, as you said, in different roles, and adapting to real-time issues that pop up because there's other forces working against you. Filmmaking is problem solving. And again, if you can put as many tools in your toolkit and you can expand your mind to know as many different things about a film and how it works as possible, you're going to be a much better problem solver. And that's really all anybody needs. Making a movie is a ridiculous concept. You think about, these professional films, these Marvel movies, even that are, armies and armies of people. It's ridiculous. So, you absolutely have to know how to wrangle that and put everybody together and work together. Otherwise, you're sunk before you even get started.